In this video, we will talk about the women's suffrage movement, how American women won the right to vote. The women's suffrage movement was a long and difficult struggle for American women to gain the right to vote. For decades, women fought tirelessly to be recognized as equal citizens and to have a say in the laws and policies that affected their lives. This movement not only changed the political landscape of the United States, but also inspired future generations to fight for equality and justice. Here's a detailed but simple explanation of how women won the right to vote. 1. Early beginnings. The seeds of the movement. The fight for women's suffrage began in the early 1800s, a time when women had very few rights and were treated as second-class citizens. Women could not own property, sign legal contracts, or even keep the money they earned if they were married. Their wages and property automatically belonged to their husbands. Most importantly, women were not allowed to vote, which meant they had no say in the laws and policies that affected their lives. Society expected women to stay at home, take care of their families, and leave all the decision-making to men. The women's suffrage movement grew out of other social reform movements that were happening at the time. Many women were involved in the fight to end slavery, abolition, and the fight against alcohol abuse, temperance. While working on these causes, women began to see how their own lack of rights was connected to the need for political power. They realized that without the right to vote, they could not make real changes in society. Voting was the key to having a voice in government and influencing laws that affected their lives, families, and communities. For example, women who fought to end slavery saw how enslaved people were denied basic rights, and they began to compare this to their own lack of rights. Similarly, women in the temperance movement wanted to reduce alcohol abuse, which often led to violence and poverty in families. But they couldn't pass laws to address the issue because they couldn't vote. These experiences made it clear that women needed political power to create a fairer and more just society. This realization sparked the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. Women started organizing, speaking out, and demanding their right to vote. They knew it would be a long and difficult fight, but they were determined to achieve equality. The movement grew over time, with women across the country joining together to demand change. Their efforts eventually led to the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920, which granted women the right to vote. This was a huge victory, but it was just the beginning of the fight for full equality for women. 2. The Seneca Falls Convention. The movement begins. The women's suffrage movement officially began in 1848 with the Seneca Falls Convention in New York. Organized by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, this was the first women's rights convention in the United States. About 300 people, including men and women, attended the two-day event. At the convention, Stanton presented the Declaration of Sentiments, a document modeled after the Declaration of Independence. It stated that all men and women are created equal and listed the ways women were treated unfairly. The most controversial demand was for women's right to vote. Many people, even some at the convention, thought this idea was too radical. However, the Seneca Falls Convention marked the beginning of the organized fight for women's suffrage. 3. Early leaders and strategies. After Seneca Falls, women like Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth, and Lucy Stone became leaders of the suffrage movement. They traveled across the country, giving speeches and organizing meetings to spread their message. They also wrote articles and petitions to convince lawmakers to support women's right to vote. In the early years, the movement focused on changing state laws. Some states, like Wyoming, 1869, and Utah, 1870, granted women the right to vote before the federal government did. However, progress was slow, and many people, including women, opposed the idea of women voting. 4. The split in the movement. By the late 19th century, the suffrage movement split into two groups. The National Woman Suffrage Association, NWSA, led by Stanton and Anthony, focused on passing a constitutional amendment to give women the right to vote. The American Woman Suffrage Association, AWSA, led by Lucy Stone, focused on winning voting rights state by state. The split weakened the movement for a time, but in 1890, the two groups joined forces to form the National American Woman Suffrage Association, NASA. Under the leadership of Carrie Chapman Catt, NASA became a powerful organization that worked tirelessly for women's suffrage. 5. The Progressive Era, a new wave of activism. In the early 20th century, the suffrage movement gained momentum during the Progressive Era, a time of social and political reform. Women were becoming more involved in public life, working in factories, attending college, and joining reform movements. They argued that they needed the right to vote to improve society, especially in areas like education, healthcare, and labor rights. Suffragists used new strategies to gain support. They organized parades, picketed the White House, and even went on hunger strikes when they were arrested. They also used media, like newspapers and posters, to spread their message. 6. World War I, a turning point. World War I, 1914 to 1918, played a key role in the fight for women's suffrage. While men were away fighting, women took on jobs in factories, hospitals, and offices. Their contributions to the war effort showed that women were just as capable as men and deserved equal rights. President Woodrow Wilson, who had initially opposed women's suffrage, changed his position during the war. He argued that giving women the right to vote was a way to reward their patriotism and support for the war. 7. The 19th Amendment. Victory at last. After decades of struggle, the suffrage movement finally achieved its goal. In 1919, Congress passed the 19th Amendment, which stated that the right to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. The amendment then went to the states for ratification. The fight for ratification was not easy. Suffragists worked hard to convince state legislatures to approve the amendment. On August 18, 1920, Tennessee became the 36th state to ratify the 19th Amendment, making it the law of the land. American women had finally won the right to vote. 8. The legacy of the women's suffrage movement. The women's suffrage movement was a major victory for equality and democracy. It showed that ordinary people, through hard work and determination, could bring about change. The movement also inspired future generations to fight for civil rights, gender equality, and social justice. However, the fight for equality did not end in 1920. Many women, especially African American, Native American, and immigrant women, still faced barriers to voting. It took decades of additional activism and legislation, such as the Voting Rights Act of 1965, to ensure that all women could exercise their right to vote. The women's suffrage movement was a long and difficult struggle, but it changed the course of American history. By winning the right to vote, women gained a powerful tool to shape their lives and their country. The courage and determination of the suffragists remind us that progress is possible, even in the face of great challenges. Their legacy continues to inspire people around the world to fight for equality and justice. What do you think of our video? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. Also, subscribe to our channel before you go. Thank you for watching.